She looked at him and said, "You promised I'd be your wife." What he asked next shattered her. "You promised I'd be your wife." Her voice didn't shake, but something beneath it did. A quiet, aching crack that revealed years of longing and heartbreak, hidden behind a fragile smile. It was the kind of fissure that only forms when someone has carried pain silently for far too long. Ethan froze mid-step. They stood across the subway platform in Chicago, a place crowded with commuters, noise, and motion. Yet, in that moment, everything else disappeared. The city faded. The screeching of trains, the chatter of strangers, even the rush of the wind all vanished. There was only Lena, only her eyes, impossibly blue, staring straight into his soul. Ethan Carter, 6'3", broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored coat that radiated control, power, and success, turned slowly toward her. The man standing here was not the same man she had loved in college. Life had carved him differently, sharper angles, a more guarded presence, and a quiet intensity in his gaze that demanded respect. Lena, more slender, graceful, her hair catching the fluorescent lights, clutched her coat as if it were armor. The same eyes that had captivated him years ago now carried weight, memories, and unspoken questions. She had changed too, but not entirely. Some parts of her, the warmth, the vulnerability, remained the same. Ethan's lips parted, calm, low, controlled, yet the tremor in his chest betrayed the years of longing he had buried. Why does it matter now? The question struck like lightning. Lena's throat tightened. She swallowed hard, forcing words past the lump of emotion, because it never stopped mattering. 8 years had passed since that night. 8 years since they had been everything to each other. Late night study sessions, cheap pizza, shared in empty dorm lounges, whispered dreams of future weddings and family under dim lights. Ethan had promised her a ring on graduation night. She had believed him with all her heart. But life, as it often does, had other plans. Ethan had started his career in finance, one of the only black analysts in a firm dominated by people who didn't look like him. Microaggressions were daily, invisible punches that he learned to swallow. He worked twice as hard to be seen as half as capable. Dinners were skipped, calls were missed, weekends became battles of survival. Meanwhile, Lena had felt the absence growing, the silence expanding like a shadow. Her parents pressed for answers. Friends whispered, "Can he provide? Is this permanent? Do you understand what marrying him means?" Her defense of him grew weary under the pressure. The cracks appeared slowly, imperceptibly at first. Then one night the argument erupted. "You promised," Lena had said, tears streaming down her face. "You promised I'd be your wife." Ethan had looked at her with tired eyes, pride wounded, love still burning beneath the exhaustion. "I can't be your husband yet," he said. "Not yet." To Lena, not yet sounded like never. 2 weeks later, he left Chicago for New York, chasing a promotion, chasing a dream he thought she deserved, thinking she would wait. She thought he chose ambition over them. Their calls faded, texts dwindled, and eventually silence swallowed them whole. And now here they were, on a crowded platform, staring across time and distance. "It matters, because I built my life around the idea of us," Lena said, her voice barely above the roar of the trains. "And when you left, I lost who I was." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You think I didn't lose anything?" I don't know," she whispered, eyes flickering with old pain. "I lost you," he said, quietly. But each word carried the weight of his own years of loneliness. "And I lost myself trying to survive a world that didn't want me to love you freely." A pause, a space heavy with unspoken words and memories. Then she said the words that cut through the years like a blade iron. "Getting married." Time stopped. Her words landed with the force of a hurricane. "Next month," she added quickly. "I didn't plan to tell you. I didn't expect to see you here, but I needed you to know." Ethan nodded slowly, emotion carefully veiled. "Congratulations." She shook her head, frustrated with the impossibility of the moment. "That's not what I want." "Then why tell me?" "Because I need to know," she whispered. "Did you ever really plan to marry me?" Ethan studied her face, memorizing the lines that time had carved, the subtle signs of heartbreak she tried to hide. Finally, he answered. "Yes," he said. "Every day." Her breath caught. "Then why wasn't I worth fighting for?" "Because loving her wasn't the hard part. Surviving the world while loving her, that had been the battle he lost countless times." He leaned closer, voice almost a confession. "Because loving you wasn't the hard part. Surviving the world while loving you was." A train screeched to a halt behind them. Wind whipped past. Newspapers scattered like tiny white ghosts in the chaos. The moment fractured, leaving jagged edges of memory and regret. "I waited 3 years, Ethan," she admitted, tears spilling freely. "And I built a life thinking you'd come find me," he replied, voice heavy with truth and pain. The doors opened, commuters rushed past. Life moved on, but they remained frozen in the gravity of the moment. Are you happy? She asked, suddenly, her voice trembling. Yes, he lied. She nodded, seemingly believing the lie, and stepped onto the train. As the doors slid closed, their eyes locked one last time, a silent conversation of regret, love, longing, and questions that remained unanswered. Ethan stood rooted, heart pounding, realizing something terrifying. The question he had asked, why does it matter now, had an answer he wasn't ready to face, because it still mattered too much. The story hadn't started on a subway platform. It had begun years ago in the messy dorms of Chicago University. Ethan and Lena had been inseparable. He had been different from anyone she had ever met, smart, driven, fiercely protective, and acutely aware of the world's biases. Lena had been equally determined, fiercely independent, and willing to fight for love in a world that often discouraged it. Late nights studying together turned into whispered dreams. Pizza boxes became tiny altars for laughter and secrets. College parties were punctuated by quiet moments where their hands brushed and their hearts spoke without words. Ethan promised her a future one that included a ring, a wedding, and children who would inherit both their courage and compassion. Lena believed him without question, but ambition and society's cruelty soon intervened. Ethan's first job was brutal. The corporate environment was hostile, subtle in its prejudice, and exhausting. Every success had to be twice as hard, every mistake magnified. Friends and family whispered warnings to Lena. You can't expect him to have it all, one friend said. Is this safe for you? Another asked. Meanwhile, Ethan faced scrutiny and bias he could not ignore. The sleepless nights, the constant proving, the invisible barriers, it all became a wall between him and Lena. He thought he was protecting her, but he was slowly losing her. Lena's parents, while loving, were not immune to society's silent rules. Her father, proud and traditional, often questioned the choices she made. Her mother, sweet but anxious, feared the hardships Lena might endure. Are you sure about him? Her mother asked once over breakfast. I know what my heart says, Lena replied, fiercely. But even hearts with clarity can be broken by absence, silence, and misunderstanding. The months Ethan spent climbing corporate ladders in New York turned into years of physical and emotional distance. Lena waited, sometimes hoping, sometimes resenting, always aching. Ethan, in turn, built walls around himself, convincing himself that distance and achievement were proof of love. But in reality, he was surviving, not thriving. And he believed love required endurance over expression. When they met again 8 years later, everything was heightened. The air between them crackled with unresolved tension. Passersby sensed nothing, but every glance, every slight movement carried a weight neither of them could ignore. Ethan's calm exterior was a shield. Lena's vulnerability was a sword. Their conversation, fragmented and hesitant, revealed as much about their lost years as their words did. Every answer brought more questions. I'm getting married, Lena had confessed. And in that single sentence, the world had shifted. Ethan had to confront not just the woman in front of him, but the years of fear, ambition, pride, and missed opportunity. Ethan didn't sleep that night. The city lights of Manhattan shimmered below his penthouse window, mocking him with their restless brilliance. He had achieved what many only dreamed of: status, wealth, influence. The world finally recognized him. Yet none of it mattered now. All of it felt hollow the moment Lena had stepped onto that train. He replayed her words over and over. I waited 3 years. 3 years she had held space for him. 3 years he had been blind, or maybe too proud to notice, or perhaps too afraid to admit the truth. Hours later, at 3:17 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He stared at it for what felt like a lifetime before answering. Ethan. Her voice soft, vulnerable, but unmistakably hers sliced through the silence. I shouldn't be calling, Lena said, but I can't stop thinking about you. He exhaled, the tension in his chest loosening just slightly, then don't stop. Silence hung heavy, breaths matched, hearts connected across miles of emptiness. I'm not happy, she admitted. He's kind, he's safe, but he's not you. Ethan closed his eyes, the memory of their last confrontation on the platform haunting him. Lena, I know, she rushed on. I'm not asking you to say me. I just need the truth one last time. He paced his apartment, every instinct screaming that this was dangerous, that lives hearts and futures were hanging by threads. But some truths cannot be left unspoken. I loved you enough to let you go, he said finally, but I was wrong to disappear. I thought if I became more, the world would finally let me have you. And did it? She asked, voice trembling. No, he replied simply, because the world doesn't give permission. We take it. The words hung like a promise, heavy with everything unsaid between them, 2 days later, they met again, this time deliberately. No chance encounters, no crowded platforms. A quiet cafe tucked away in a corner of Manhattan. No trains, no chaos. Just them. Lena looked different. Older, wiser, stronger. A woman forged in the fires of heartbreak. The same eyes, though they carried the same impossible intensity he remembered, but now tempered with the weight of experience. They talked for hours, hours that stretched like lifetimes, about everything they never said. The unspoken pain, the missed opportunities, the hidden sacrifices. Ethan revealed the racism he endured silently, the barriers he faced, the nights spent doubting himself. Lena confessed the loneliness she carried alone, the nights spent imagining a life he might never return for. The conversation unfolded like peeling layers of an onion, each revealing raw, unprotected emotions. I don't know what I'm doing, Lena said finally, tears glinting in the dim cafe lights. But I know I can't walk down an aisle pretending my heart isn't elsewhere. Ethan's voice was steady, calm. I won't ask you to leave him. She looked at him, incredulous. Why? Because love isn't pressure, he said simply. It's choice. And choice can't be coerced. She smiled, a mixture of relief and sadness. You always were better at words than I was. Days passed. Weeks passed. Lena wrestled with fear, doubt, and societal expectations. Family pressure were relentless. Her mother cried. Her father raged. Friends whispered, "You're ruining your life. Do you know what people will say after all this time?" But for the first time in her life, Lena didn't listen. She packed one suitcase and a heart full of fear and hope. Boarding a flight to New York, she wasn't running anymore. She was choosing. When Ethan opened the door and saw her standing there, eyes red from tears, but smiling, he didn't speak. There was nothing to say that could match this moment. You promised I'd be your wife, she said again. He studied her face not for love, but for certainty. The only question that mattered now, are you choosing me or running from fear? She stepped inside, closing the door, and took his hands in hers. I'm choosing us, she whispered. Years later, people would still talk about the interracial couple who defied expectation, about the woman who walked away from a wedding, about the black man who refused to beg for love, yet earned it in a way the world could never deny. But none of it mattered. What mattered was simple, pure, and eternal. Love didn't fail them. Fear did. And when they finally chose courage over comfort, the promise made years ago was kept. Before she boarded the plane, Lena had been a storm of doubt and anxiety. She had replayed every conversation, every memory, every moment of silence between them. Her friends had warned her, you're crazy to risk this now. After all these years, stability is safer than love. But safe had never been what she wanted. Not with Ethan. Not with the man who had promised her forever. She remembered the night Ethan left Chicago. She had sat by the window for hours, staring at the empty street, heartbreaking piece by piece. She had imagined a life with him, a wedding, a home, children laughing in the backyard. All gone, all stolen by pride, ambition, and silence. And yet, when she saw him on that subway platform, the old spark ignited. A spark that told her the story wasn't over. Not yet. Ethan's life in New York hadn't been easy either. He had climbed every rung of the corporate ladder, but it had cost him friendships, laughter, and peace of mind. He had spent nights wondering if Lena had moved on, if she had found someone else, if he had missed his chance forever. He endured racism silently, microaggressions disguised as advice, meetings where his ideas were ignored until repeated by someone else. He excelled, but every victory was hollow without her by his side. The cafe became their sanctuary. No world outside, just two hearts navigating the remnants of the past. Every conversation was a revelation. Every pause a reminder of what they had lost and what could still be reclaimed. They spoke of dreams deferred, of the weight expectations, of nights spent crying alone, missed anniversaries, and of the subtle, unspoken societal pressures that had kept them apart. I thought I had to survive first, Ethan admitted. I thought love wasn't enough in a world that's already against us. And I waited, Lena said softly. I waited, hoping you'd come back, not realizing I was slowly losing myself in the process. It was a conversation neither of them had expected but both needed. 2 weeks before her wedding, Lena had made her decision. She stood before her parents, trembling, yet unwavering. I can't marry him, she declared. Her mother cried. Her father's face darkened with anger. Friends whispered judgments. Society had expectations. But for the first time, Lena ignored them all. She wasn't choosing chaos. She was choosing love. She boarded a plane to New York with nothing but one suitcase and the certainty of her heart. When she arrived, Ethan opened the door, and the world seemed to hold its breath. You promised I'd be your wife, she said. He looked at her, searching for certainty, for truth. and then asked, "Are you choosing me or running from fear?" Her answer was simple, direct and final. "I'm choosing us." Years later, the story of Ethan and Lena would be told in whispers, in articles, in conversations about courage, love, and breaking societal expectations. People would marvel at the woman who walked away from a wedding and the man who refused to beg for love but earned it with patience, integrity, and unwavering devotion. None of it mattered to them. What mattered was the quiet truth: love didn't fail them. Fear did. When courage finally outweighed comfort, the promise made years ago was honored. The life they had dreamed of together, one interrupted, delayed, and tested, finally became real. They built a life of laughter, shared dreams, and quiet nights together. Every morning reminded them of the distance they had crossed, the battles they had fought, and the love that had survived it all. Because some promises, even when delayed, are worth keeping forever.